Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast. My name is JT Olson, flying solo tonight. Unfortunately, co host Garrett Ballard wasn't able to join this week. We'd had it all set up. We were going to come on, we were going to talk Senior Bowl, and unfortunately, life got in the way last second. But Garrett did send me his list of guys to watch, so we'll go over them a little bit later. But before that, we had this beautiful show mapped out. It was going to be all Senior Bowl. We were going to talk Shrine Bowl guys. Shrine Bowl's already come and gone since then. And then all of a sudden, our offensive coordinator went and left us. We'd had it all worked out. We'd already talked smack. We'd already celebrated. Liam Coen's coming back. And just like that, he's gone. Off to Jacksonville. Without a word, in the dead of night, slithers away. And that's a big deal. Man, there's no two ways about it. Liam Coen, while he may be a slimy, slithery snake, was a really, really good offensive coordinator for us last year. And that's a loss. And we can talk about how we left and the situation is going to, and we can talk about it 100 different ways to Sunday. The bottom line is the Bucs lost a really big piece of their puzzle. And that's truly a bummer because I was really excited to have him back. I was excited to have Baker Mayfield get a little bit of consistency. You know, it's going to have the first time he'd have the same offensive coordinator for multiple seasons. And, you know, the way the offense was clicking last year under Liam Coen, you thought they'd only build on that. So to lose him, regardless of the circumstance, that's a big loss for the Buccaneers. And I can't say they'll replace him with someone who's just as good because he did a very good job. Even if the next guy comes in and does a good job, like he's Dave Canales, or say he's better than Dave Canales, doesn't mean he'll be as good as Liam Coen was. So, huge loss for the Bucs. Want to start there. Can't overstate how valuable Liam Coen was in terms of his play design, in terms of what he brought in scheming open the run, the blocking schemes. He made a lot of things happen. Very multiple, very versatile, very adaptable. And it's a bummer to lose a guy like that. But that's how the game works. You have a good coordinator, you're a successful team. Bad teams are going to try and poach that guy, try and recreate that formula, try and steal the secret sauce. That's business. I have no hard feelings about it. None. You know, whether it's Liam Coen, Ben Johnson, you know, whoever coordinator you want to pick. If they're really good and they've got all those intangible skills, those leadership skills, those are things that are going to make them prime head coach candidates. And if you can get one of those jobs, you take them because they pay double, triple what the highest end coordinators are making. You get more freedom. You get to steer the ship. All falls on you. Your vision. And make no mistake, to be an NFL coach, you have to have a degree of ego to you. So to have all the authority, you make all the shots. That's appealing to anyone, let alone the money that's going to set up your family for life. I have no hard feelings with anyone taking a job. You know, if some of these, you know, other guys, Larry Foote, he was looking at a defensive coordinator position with the Lions. No hard feelings there. If you would have got that job, it'd be best of luck. See you in the playoffs. Hope we kick your teeth in. But other than that, power to you. Casey Rogers took the defensive line coach in Detroit. Cool. Have a nice life. Thank you for your service. No hard feelings. It's a business, and these men and women have to do what's right for them and their family. These opportunities, especially head coaching opportunities, don't come around that often. That's totally fine. I get it. That's the game. With that said, the way he went about leaving the Bucs proved that Liam Coen is a spineless, slithering coward. He's a snake. And, this is just one of those honor things. And, not something a lot of people live by. It's one of those things where you shake someone's hand, you look them in the eye, and you say what you mean, and that's the end of it. That is law. You don't need contracts. You don't need, all these things. It's a handshake and integrity. That's how it was in a simpler time. It's not that way anymore. Because slimy, slithery snakes will never live by it. And Liam Coen is that way. The slimiest, slitheriest kind of snake. Brilliant, but completely lacking in integrity and seemingly leadership. To lie, to look these people in the face and lie to them after they gave you your big break, after they wanted to make you the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL, after Todd Bowles went to bat for you, fighting for you to get this big contract. All these people fighting for Liam Coen, and Liam Coen looks him in the eye and lies to him. It's shameful. I have no respect for it. I have none. And maybe some people do. Maybe some people don't care. That's them. Everyone lives by their own ethics code. But I have very little tolerance for people who are going to sit there and lie to me. Especially someone who is considered a friend, who you have been through all of this with. Late nights, ups and downs of the season. They have had a long year together. They worked hard, side by side, hour after hour. Grueling work. Especially the players that worked for him. And to just have no regard. Lie to them. Say, I'm coming back. I'm taking this contract. I'm going to be the highest paid coordinator. And we're going to make magic happen. And then to just blow all of it off. Not answer a phone, not answer a text, an email, a DM, nothing. I mean, it was like, it's like a train wreck high school relationship where you're just texting and texting. Why won't they respond? Why won't they respond? It's because they're out with your best friend. That's why. They're out with the team down the street. And, Liam, like a gentleman would, did eventually contact Todd with 5 minutes before the reports broke. By the time he had actually reached out to Todd, people in Jacksonville had already contacted Todd and said, hey, Liam's here. Plan accordingly. By the time Liam Coen had reached out to Todd Bowles, Robert Saleh had changed his travel plans to not bother coming because he knew Liam Coen was getting that job. So to send Todd a pity phone call in which he lied to him, it was a pity phone call where he again lied to his face. That's just pathetic. That's spineless stuff. And it's a bummer because Liam was loved in Tampa Bay. All the fans loved Liam Coen. The offense was clicking under him. The design was brilliant. Everything he did, people loved. And even the playoff game, where it wasn't perfect, I criticized him, rightfully so. So many people attacked me. How dare you say Liam Coen didn't have a great game plan? People were ready to go to battle for this guy. Fans were screaming to fire Todd Bowles to promote this guy. It was a cult following. And he didn't even care. He just did not have any regard for anyone in Tampa. You hate to see it. You really do. Because now the Bucs are worse off. Liam Coen has burned the bridges. And Hey, good for him. He got the bag. He gets to pick his general manager. He gets to work with Trevor Lawrence, who I still think is a very talented quarterback. He gets to try and prove himself. Sets his family up for generations. Cool beans. Lucky you. I don't think it's going to work. So much about coaching and teaching requires buy-in from your players. It requires authentic, genuine human relationships. That's really hard to do when you're fake. And make no mistake, Liam Coen is fake. He is as fake as a greasy used car salesman. He is going to sit there and lie to you, right to your face. And you know what? It's only a matter of time until his players smell it, because people are really good at detecting BS. People know when they're being lied to. And if they don't, they find out quick once they get stabbed in the back. So I will not deny how good Liam Coen is as an offensive mind. But I'd be lying to you if I said I think it's going to work out in Jacksonville. Maybe I'm wrong. He's very talented, very smart. I just don't think he has the leadership qualities to be successful there, which I had said even before he was taking that job. We don't know anything about Liam Coen as a leader. I cannot advocate for him to replace Todd Bowles, to fire Todd Bowles and place this guy when we don't really know anything about him as a man, as a person. Well, we have learned a little bit more about him, and it's not a good look. So the Bucs are moving on. It's over. It's done. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Liam Coen is gone. He's a slimy, slithery snake, and he's dead to me. And he's dead to Tampa. But someone's going to replace him. And that's what I care about at this point. Who's the next guy who's coming in? I don't know. Bucs have already interviewed 4 people for the job. Jason Light is wasting no time replacing this guy. And I love that. Big things are happening. The offseason's in full swing. The Senior Bowl starts this week. Tomorrow, actually. First practice. Weigh-ins have already happened. You got to find an offensive coordinator. You got to have your plan in place so you know what targets you want in free agency. Who's going to fit that offense? Who are you going to draft? Who's going to be the player, the prototype who fits best with what you do offensively? You can't answer those questions if you don't know what you're doing offensively and you don't know who your coordinator is. So this is a priority. It has to get done quickly. Even going into this week and it not being done puts the Buccaneers at a disadvantage. Make no mistake about it. I won't say it's a huge disadvantage, but if you don't have a coach or your coordinators and you are evaluating players, you don't know what you're doing, it's a problem. Especially in this event, because the Bucs draft heavy in the Senior Bowl. They always get guys from the Senior Bowl. Every year under Light, it seems like. So to be shorthanded like this going into it, it's disappointing. Especially when you had your team in place. You thought you were set. You weren't making any plans to lose him because he said he was coming back. And now he's not. And now you got to figure it out on the fly. In terms of the candidates, I won't get too deep into them because we really don't know a ton about any of these guys. But the trend is they're all young. I think the oldest guy they interviewed so far has been 42. 2 guys from the McVay tree. I think a passing game coordinator and tight ends coach, and then maybe an offensive assistant. Both seem like really smart guys. They got a guy from Minnesota they brought in for an interview. Again, Kevin O'Connell, head coach of Minnesota. He's a Sean McVay disciple. So, same system. And Kevin O'Connell has done a really good job up in Minnesota. The Vikings to win 14 games this year was amazing, especially with Sam Darnold at quarterback. That is a testament to great coaching. And to get a guy from that tree, I'd be happy about. And again, we don't know a lot about these guys, but the prototype they're looking at, I think it makes a lot of sense. Guys who know the system, Guys who are young, they're innovative. Bring it in. That's what you want. You want that voice in the room who's going to think outside the box, who's going to try new things, who's going to ditch an original game plan and figure out what you do best. They're adaptable. They're flexible. They're not set in their ways. I'm for it. I like the mold they're looking at, the prototype. So, it'll probably be another week before we find out. Take your time, go through the process, get it right. At this point, I have full faith in Todd Bowles and Jason Light to find the right candidate. They found Dave Canales, and, it was not a popular job then. It was not an appealing job when Dave Canales took over. But they identified him. He had all those intangibles that you like: leadership, teaching, positive, communication. He had helped revive Geno Smith's career in Seattle. They brought him in to install the system. It made sense. It's a good hire. Then they brought in Liam Coen, who was even more of an unknown. Sure, he was OC under Sean McVay, but McVay really called all the plays. He was bouncing between the NFL and college, coaching at Kentucky as their offensive coordinator. Not some, hot name in the coaching world. But they identified him, and they brought him in. They liked him. They went through their process, and they got it right. So far, Todd Bowles is 2-0. Because remember, he did not hire Byron Leftwich. He got stuck with him. He inherited him from Bruce Arians. So you can't fault him for that guy, because Leftwich was a disaster. And Bowles identified it, got rid of him as soon as he could, brought in someone better. Then he brought in someone better to replace Canales. So I have the trust in this staff to get it right, to find the right guy, to fit what they already have in place and build on what they have. Keep the bones, the structure in place for the offense. So we'll revisit this next week. Again, we don't know when it'll be, but I don't think it'll be too long. I do think this is a high priority to get this done. They'll take their time, they'll get it right, but they want to do it quickly. So, with all that out of the way, we are moving forward. And the next thing on the NFL calendar is one of my favorite events of the year, and that's the NFL Reese's Senior Bowl. This is the premier all-star game in college football. And every year, the Bucs look heavily at guys who attend this event. I mean, Cody Mock was a guy at this event. I can go. There's a ton of them. I think Servacio Dennis was a guy at this event. Baker Mayfield, they didn't draft Baker, but he was a Senior Bowl guy. Jason Light, he is very interested in players at this event. So expect them to be there. Expect them to be talking to these kids. And expect them to draft 1, 2, 3 players who are going to be at the Senior Bowl. And I think they could go there early. I think their first-round pick could be on the field tomorrow. Because there's a couple of guys who I think really fit the bill for what they're looking for. And I wrote about it. I dropped 10 names of guys at the Senior Bowl who I think the Bucs should be looking at. 4 of them right off the bat were pass rushers. And 3 of them were edge rushers, and 1 was a defensive lineman. And unfortunately, that guy is not participating. I think he's there, but I don't think he's going to be doing on-field practice or participate in the game. That was Walter Nolan, defensive tackle from Ole Miss. And he's one of my favorite players so far that I've watched. I've watched about 20 guys in depth, and he's really one of the best 5 so far. He is explosive. He uses his hands well. He's extremely disruptive. He's everything and more people wanted someone like Logan Hall to be, but isn't. And we talk about pass rush, and most people will jump right to the edge, which makes sense. But if you put a disruptor like Walter Nolan next to Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, man, that's a pass rush. I don't care who's playing the edge. Those three guys are going to wreak havoc in the backfield. So he's a name I really like, but he's not participating. There are 3 edge rushers, and I think 2 of them could go in the first round, who I think are going to be on the Bucs' radar. And one of them is a very hot name so far in this cycle. He led the nation in sacks last year. That's Mike Green. He is the pass rusher from Marshall. And his original listing from early in the season, before the season started, put him at the mid 230 pounds. He's undersized. Weighed in today in the 250s. So he's not small. Doesn't have the greatest arm length in the world, but he's not teeny tiny. And this guy is an athlete. He is scrappy against the run. And you talk about an absolute bag of tricks in terms of pass rush moves. Green's got it. He's got spin moves. He's got cross chops. He's got really anything you can think of. He can do it. He's a polished pass rusher, and that's a big part of why he led the country in sacks. And you might be thinking, sure, he played at Marshall. It's not very good competition. It's not like he was playing in the SEC. You're right. The competition, not as good. But the film never lies. I don't care what the level of competition is. If you see an athlete and he is a technician with his hands, that's going to translate. And we saw it translate when he played Ohio State. Marshall played Ohio State this year. And guess what? Mike Green was still every bit as good. So I think he's really going to shine this week. There's a couple of premier tackles, some of the big names in terms of offensive tackles in the draft. He's going to have a chance to really show out against top competition. And I think he's going to look really good. I think after this week, he could be talked about as a top 15 prospect. Maybe someone who will be available for the Bucs, but not a guarantee. And there's other big names here. Stewart, the name from Texas A&M. He was the opposite of Mike Green. Played in a big conference, but had almost no production. And he is a physical freak. And he's going to be looked at closely. Nick Scorton is going to be at this event. And he is a very polished pass rusher. And he's not as explosive or athletic as I might ideally like, but he is going to be a first-round pick. And then one of the other names who I like at edge, and I think this is going to be one who the Bucs look closely at, is Princely, and I'm probably going to butcher this last name because I only read it, Humanalian. And he is the edge rusher from Ole Miss. This guy looks like a freak athlete. Weighed in at 6'4", 264 pounds. That's what he weighed in today. And his tape, he is explosive. He is incredibly fluid, incredibly bendy. If you're looking for a speed edge rusher who can turn the corner and just get to the quarterback, this guy has the physical tools to do it. Dude is a beast. And he is not as polished as Mike Green. He's not. But he might be a better athlete than Mike Green. And he could be a better NFL player than Mike Green. I think the Bucs should be looking at him heavily because he could turn out to be the best pass rusher in this draft. I don't think that's crazy to say. I don't think he will be because there's a couple of guys who I like better. And again, he is not a finished product. But Princely Humanalian is a freak. And he is exactly the type of player that the Bucs need. So those are a couple of guys who could go in the first. Excuse me. This is a really deep edge class. And there's a couple other guys who I really like. And they're a little smaller, but I think they can be really good NFL players. One is Donovan Ezraku from Boston College. And he's not huge. He's only 6'2". I think he's like 245. But he has long arms. And he's scrappy against the run. So he's a little smaller. He's a little undersized. But I'm not concerned about him being undersized. what really helps him out is he has long arms. I think he measured in at 34 plus inch arms, which is really good. It's really where you want him. And he is another guy who is a technician. He has a ton of pass rush moves, and he's really polished with all of them. So he's someone who I think was one of the more productive pass rushers in college football last year. And I think that's another one who's absolutely going to translate to the NFL. And he's someone who's probably going to go in the second round. So if you're someone who really wants the Bucs to go, say, corner in the first round, and you're looking at the second round for an edge rusher, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, he's someone who should be on the Bucs radar. Another one from Michigan, Josiah Stewart. He's even smaller. He's like 6 foot even, 240 pounds. Not a big dude. But he's someone who actually reminds me a lot of Shaq Barrett in terms of how he plays. He's a speed rusher more than anything, but he is way scrappier against the run than you think. He will not back down from anybody. And he might not win every rep against the run, but he's going to fight every rep against the run, and he's going to make people work for it. And he's got a couple of good moves. He is not as polished as a guy like Mike Green or Ezeraku, but he's not raw. He is someone who's got some pass rush moves, and he uses them well. He was a key part of that Michigan national championship team last year. He was part of a really good Michigan defense this year. So I think he'll probably go late second, probably more mid-third, just because he is undersized. But I see a pathway for him being a Shaq Barrett type player who is not a lot bigger. I think he's like 6'1", 250. So I could see them having a very similar career arc. Shaq Barrett went undrafted. Josiah Stewart's not going to go undrafted. But I see them being the same mold, the same prototype. So those are a few guys who I really like. Pass rushers. We know it's the biggest need for the Bucs. You got to hit it. And they're going to hit it early, first round or second round. Which is, I don't know. I think it should be first round. And I think it should be one of those guys, if not James Pierce from Tennessee. But there's going to be a pass rusher the Bucs most likely take from here. One of those guys I just mentioned. I think after that, there aren't a ton of corners I love here, which is the other big need. I really liked Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame, but having just played in the championship game like a week and a half ago, he ended up pulling out of this event just because his body's banged up. He just got done playing like a 16-game season, regular season, then every postseason game. So he is a ball hawk safety who I like, who is scheduled to be here, but is not going to be in Mobile. I don't really have a lot of sleepers from here. I like Dorian Strong. He's a cornerback from Virginia Tech. He was listed as a guy who was bigger, could play some press man, although he's not a great athlete. He's a decent athlete, but not outstanding. But he weighed in smaller than he was listed today. He only weighed in at like 6 even and $180. So I don't think that's the prototype Todd Bowles is looking for. I think he wants corners who are bigger. So he was someone who was on the radar going into this. But, measurements aren't everything, but teams have thresholds. They're looking for a type of player who fits what they want. And Strong might be a little smaller than the ideal for what they want. So in terms of corners and safeties too, I don't love this group of defensive backs. I like the safety from Texas. I like the safety from Notre Dame. But it's not a group that is inspiring for me. It really isn't. And really, I think it's more of the same with the linebacker core. I think the linebacker group is better overall. The linebacker from UCLA, and I can't remember his name, but it's a longer name, something with an S. He's really good in coverage. But Schwessinger, there it is. He is good in coverage. He is a good prospect. I think he's going to go day 2, probably round 2. I don't think I'm going to be as high on him as other people are. Not that I dislike him. I don't know if I'm going to like him as much as other people do. And I don't think the Bucs are going to take a linebacker that high. I think it's going to be some combination of pass rusher and defensive back in the first 2 rounds. Linebacker is going to be what's left. And I think that's a big reason they should tack it in free agency. There's a lot of good linebackers in free agency. You got Servassier Dennis. Fill that need through free agency and then draft a guy in the middle rounds for depth. And that's where I came in for this linebacker class, looking at these guys. Who is a guy who is an upgrade for what they have in terms of KJ Britt or JJ Russell? We want to replace those guys. Bring in someone who is faster. He can have that sideline-to-sideline speed. Someone who is physical. And someone who could be a coverage player. Not someone like KJ Britt, who is the clunkiest athlete in the NFL. Like, there's a reason this breed of linebacker has phased out. They can't move. They can't cover. Don't want a guy like that. I want someone who is fast and fluid and agile. But you got to keep that physicality. I want someone who can tackle. It's a big list. And really, this linebacker class overall is not great. So it was hard for me to find someone who I actually liked. But I did find one linebacker who stands out. And I think he's going to be that round 3, round 4 kind of guy. And that's Nick Martin from Oklahoma State. And he's small by linebacker standards. 6 foot even, 220 pounds. But I don't think that's like terribly small. I mean, he's undersized, no doubt, but the NFL, like I said, it's more about being able to move these days. Like, how big is Fred Warner? It's not huge. How big is Levante David? 6 foot, 230. It's not a drastic difference. It's as long as you can play with physicality and speed and toughness and grit, that's all that matters, really. And Martin can do that. He is very fast. He is a great tackler. I think he led the Big 12 in tackles, not this past season, but the season before. This season, he was hurt for a lot of it, so we really didn't get to see his full potential. But he had some really strong tackling games. And I don't know that he's great in coverage right now, but he has the physical skill set to become a good coverage player. Kind of how I viewed Servassier Dennis a few years ago when he was at the Senior Bowl. Very similar. He did a lot of forward attacking. He was after the quarterback. He was processing what was in front of him, and he was attacking it. But he wasn't great in coverage. But he had the tools to be good in coverage. So it was one of those things, like, you get your hands on this guy, you get him in the room. I think he can do it. He just needs to be asked to do it. Teach him how to do it, and he moves well enough to where there's no reason he can't. Maybe he's just not asked to do it in college. Certain teams want to do things differently. It is not the same league in college. Quarterbacks are not as accurate or as dynamic. Coverage is not as important as it is in the NFL because some quarterbacks can't hit the broadside of the barn in college. So really, it's about attacking forward. It's about stopping the run. That's more important at the college level. So coverage from those players is less of a priority. Could be the case with Martin. It's just not stressed. But I don't think he's terrible at it. I think he can be good at it. You just got to get him in. So I'm really circling him as a guy who I want the Bucs to draft. Because a lot of these linebackers there, they're still kind of slow. Like, it is not a great linebacker class at all. And if you don't get Jaheed Campbell in the first round or the Sweshinger guy in the second round, there's not a ton of linebackers who I really want. And I've been looking. I mean, I like Barrett Carter from Clemson. He'd be a name I'm interested in. But, you got to get this guy round 3, round 4. This cannot be your top priority need. So I'm looking for someone with the athletic profile. I'm looking for someone who's physical, who can tackle, and that's Nick Martin. Really like what he brings to the table. I would absolutely consider him an upgrade over KJ Britt, over JJ Russell, even on day one. Just plug him in right away. He's better. Your linebacker core gets deeper. And if you run back Servassier Dennis, let's say, Nick Bolton from the Chiefs, he's a free agent. You bring him in. Let's say Levante David comes back, and he comes back in more of a reserve role, a part-time role, just because he's older. And you bring in Nick Martin, all of a sudden your linebacker core is strong. Keep KJ Britt as special teams only. That's 4 good linebackers if you get a group like that. Even if David goes out, if he retires, enjoy the Hall of Fame. You get Servassier Dennis, who I think is a really promising young linebacker. Now, free agent, Nick Bolton or Dre Greenlaw or whoever, you make a splash at linebacker there. And you have Nick Martin as that other guy, that third option. I feel really good about that. I feel like that's a really strong top 3 on your depth chart. And then you fill it out with maybe a 7th round pick. Or maybe JJ Russell is that guy. I'm not worried about your number 4 linebacker. I'm worried about your number 2 linebacker. I'm worried about your number 1 linebacker. So I think this is a position they really have to attack, but they can't afford to do it with their first 2 picks. So big-time target in free agency, and you grab a guy on round 3, round 4 like Nick Martin. And I think it's a perfect blend. There are a few other guys who I like, but I want to focus on a few that Garrett had highlighted. And he highlighted 2 positions specifically, cornerback and linebacker. And he seems to like some of these linebackers more than me. He mentioned Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker at UCLA. I think he's probably going to be a 2nd-round pick. And maybe Garrett feels like that's a good investment there. Again, I think I'm just going to be a little bit lower on him than other people. But I see the vision. He's a coverage guy, and that's what the Bucs need. He also highlighted another UCLA linebacker, and man, Garrett did me no favor sending me this name. Oluwafemi Oladejo. I can't tell you anything about him other than Garrett likes him, and his name is hard to pronounce. And another one you people probably know more than I do. It's a linebacker from Florida, Shamar James. And I don't live in the state of Florida. I do not follow any of the Florida college teams that closely, so I don't really know anything about this guy. But Garrett, I promise you, does. He is a Florida grad. He is a Gator alumni. So he knows his Florida football. So this Shamar James guy, Garrett likes, advocating him to be a Buccaneer. He also has an FSU guy on this list. And, Florida State, I know it's a thing. Nice little rivalry down there. So for him to put a Seminole on this list, it just speaks to how good he is. And I've actually heard a couple of people talk this guy up. I haven't got to his film yet, but he's someone who's on the radar. And again, not the easiest name. Azari Thomas? Am I saying that right? But he is a cornerback from FSU. He's a bigger body quarterback. I think he would really fit in the mold that the Bucs are looking for. He's someone who's on my radar. I haven't gotten to his film yet, but Garrett likes him. He comes highly recommended from the co-host, so he's one who I have to get into sooner rather than later. And again, seems like he fits the prototype, so it makes sense to me. I'm in. Now, I did mention that the Shrine Bowl had just ended today. And there were a couple of guys there who really stood out. Jordan Phillips, a defensive tackle from Maryland. He seems like he's going to be a really promising defensive lineman. Kobe Bryant, a cornerback from Kansas. That's someone that Garrett had highlighted. And then someone we both had highlighted who I wanted to mention, Chris Paul, linebacker from Ole Miss. He's another one. Athletic profile. Makes perfect sense. He is fast and physical and fluid. I think he could be a good coverage player in the NFL. And that's what the Bucs need at linebacker. That's where they got killed this year, in the middle of the field, because their linebackers could not cover anyone. Chris Paul could change that. He has the profile to do it. Again, I don't know that he's a great coverage player now, but he's good. I think I see it. I'm really interested in his skill set. He's another one who I think I'm just going to be a little bit lower on than some people. And one thing I really value in my linebackers is the ability to kind of pick your way through the mess. And Lavonte David is an artist at it. And it's not fair to compare anyone to Lavonte David. But, he can feel when the block is coming. He knows when to accelerate and shoot a gap. There are bodies flying around him, and he just moves his way through them like it's nothing and makes a play. Chris Paul is not like that. He is not that guy. He is flowing to the ball, and he gets stuck on the guard, and he's washed out of the play. And I see it too much on tape to where I'm in love with him as a linebacker prospect. But he is fast, and he is physical, and he can tackle. And more than anything, he could cover. So he definitely fits the mold for what the Bucs need, what the Bucs are looking for. So if you want to get a little bit more in depth on him, go check out Real Bucs Talk. I know they just did a profile on him. They broke down some of his film. Those guys over there do a really good job. So I would recommend highly checking them out. Real Bucs Talk. Big fans of Chris Paul, not the point guard, but the linebacker. So if you're not already following their work, change that immediately. Go check out their video. So he's another one who could go second, maybe third round. And if he's there in the third, I'm for it. I wouldn't go second round because that is not one of my priorities. I don't think his talent necessarily fits where they're going to be picking in the second round. And just in terms of need, I don't think it's a top 2 need, even though it is a glaring need. But like I said, it's a good free agency class for linebacker. It's not a good class for edge rushers. So take your money, solidify your linebacker position, go get yourself a legitimate player there, and add depth in the draft. You can develop a guy like Chris Paul or Nick Martin to be a good starter down the line, to be a really good backup currently. I really do think that's the secret sauce right there. So I'll wrap it up there. Just a couple of names I wanted to highlight. If you want a few more names, you can go check out my article on bucksreport.com. Like I said, I listed out 10. I think 2 or 3 have dropped out. Really wish Walter Nolan was going to be taking part in the event, but a lot of times these guys will drop out like that. Not uncommon at all. So we will be going live again on Friday. Garrett should be back, life allowing, and we'll talk about what happened this week at the Senior Bowl, because by that time, practices will be done. We'll have all the information. We'll see how these guys looked, who won on the one-on-ones, who got shredded, who is talking to teams in interviews. We're just going to start to get that information over the next couple of days. So Garrett and I will be back to break it down. Until then, my name is JT Olson. You can find all of my written work at bucksreport.com. You can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Icewater Olson. And until next time, go Bucs.